Right.
Deb, can you introduce yourself for us?
No, she's
She's
muted.
still muted, just unmute herself.
Love technology.
Oh,
There she goes.
Deb, can you hear us okay? There you
Yeah, I
go.
can hear you guys fine.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, of course, I'm sorry. Deborah Wright, representing Rockingham.
Thanks, Deb. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Fader from Grafton.
David Clark, I represent Westminster on the Union High School Board.
Priscilla Lambert, I'm representing Rockingham.
June Streeter, I represent Westminster.
Jason Terry, represent Rockingham.
Nicole Barnett, admin assistant to the superintendent.
Mike Stack, Rockingham.
Jamie Starrow, I represent Westminster.
Rob Welch, representing Rockingham.
And Andy, I missed you. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, Andy Haas, Superintendent.
And thank you for joining us, Andy. Appreciate that. And we also have somebody else joining us from the West WNESU. Cheryl, could you introduce yourself, maybe?
Sure. Cheryl Charles, Chair of the SU Board and the Westminster Board.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Is there any adjustments to the agenda? So?
Yes, I'd like 9A to be corrected. It is February 26th.
Okay. Thank you, Priscilla, for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Seeing nothing else, we're going to move into communication and public comment. And seeing that we have four possible. And I know I have a public comment, so we're going to go 3 minutes, if that's okay. Is there anybody online that would like to do a public comment? All right, seeing none. Anybody in the audience? Mr. Reese, go right ahead.
Yeah, Paul Reese, Bellows Falls. I actually was really impressed when I saw this little thing about Terrier Village by Mr. Stack. And the reason I said it, I say this, is Tony Kissel built Kissel Hill the exact same day or time frame, and we're friends with my dad. He built that housing development up on Kissel Hill, and my dad built Jackie Reese development in the 1960s. And it was a 20-acre development. And they sold the houses like hotcakes because teachers needed a place to live. And I was adding up in my head between Kissel Hill and Reese Circle, we actually housed over 16 teachers and staff members that worked at this school combined. So there was housing in the 70s for all the teachers in this area. So I honestly believe it's a good thing to look into with the 180 acres. Even if you sold 20 acres, I don't know if you could, to a private industry, not only for teachers, but travelers, nurses. And I actually think it's a win-win thing. When you've got the beautiful walking trails, you got tennis courts, it'd be ideal. I don't even think you'd have to advertise, but I don't know the logistics of it, but I just actually was kind of in favor of that with water and sewer. You got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gravel and material in your 180 acres of land. When you go behind the football field, I says, when I used to run the football planes, it's all gravel. That's big money. So just, it's something to think about. Don't throw the idea totally out. All right, see ya.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Anybody else? I think somebody else joined us online. I don't, maybe I don't.
No.
Anybody else? Okay, so I have a public comment. My name is Jason Terry, representing Rockingham. So we all received an email from, I believe we all received an email from Ms. Kornheiser about Act 127 last week. And I was stressing out a little bit because I might have had to hold up the agenda, but after reviewing it, so what we received basically with the cap removed and us under 5%, meaning this high school board when we did the budget, we should not be affected. Also because we benefited from the waiting, we would not get any cent relief. The option to rebudget and push vote back is really not a need for us, in my opinion, based on the information I have. as we did not overinflate the budget beyond 5%. Today, the House Ways and Means Committee continued its work on changes to the transition mechanism in Act 127. The committee heard testimony from the following witnesses, including Amy Minor from VSA and Ford Diaz Smith for VSBA. And this is, this is a public document. They sent this out, and I think pretty much all school boards have this information. So my comment is congratulations to us. We're probably not going to have, no need for an audit review. We did not overinflate our budget, and I think we did good. My public comment. Next up, we have, there's no other public comment. We have review and approve board minutes for January 22nd. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept as written.
Okay, any questions? We have a motion on the floor to accept
I
the,
have a question.
Priscilla?
Yeah, if you read Andy Hoss's, I'm not quite sure what the second sentence means.
Can you tell us what page, Priscilla?
I'm looking for it. I remember reading it this afternoon, but
You're looking for Andy?
on the front page.
Perfect.
Yeah, where it says, it is challenging for members to discuss what was being discussed in detail. I'm not quite sure what that means. And I don't know what he said. I did not go back and review it.
That's regarding the negotiations.
Right.
Yep.
But it doesn't make sense. The sentence doesn't make sense. So I don't know what the suggestion would be to change it. Maybe Andy has a
Andy's
suggestion.
here. Andy, do you happen to recall? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. I'm used to using multiple screens, so,
Sorry about that.
It's challenging for members.
Priscilla, what was it under again?
Under number 4.
It's Andy Haas, right on the front page, the first page of it.
I
It doesn't make sense.
honestly cannot recall exactly what I said, so I would have to go back and listen to the tape.
So
So
maybe just having the person review it and see if it could be tweaked a little bit to
So
make a
is
little
your
more sense.
recommendation to do that and then correct it and then accept, or?
Yeah, I think we can accept it, and, with Tara going back and looking at that and maybe clarifying that sentence just slightly.
Okay, so we're going to motion on the floor, approve minutes with correction when we get those corrections. Should be a pretty easy fix. I'm going to start online. Deb?
Aye.
Mary? David?
Yes.
Priscilla? June?
Yes.
Mike? Yes. Jamie? Rob?
Yes.
Perfect. Motion passes. All right, unfinished old business. Priscilla, why don't you fill us in on the policy work that you and Jamie did?
Okay, let's start with the D6 class size on January 18th. I would make a motion to approve that policy. It was posted on January 18th, 2024. And what that involves is simply adding to our policy that we already had. You approved the original policy without the high school in there on, I'm looking for the date, on January 18th, 2024. That's this one. I'm sorry.
Was this the procedures for minimum and optimal? This
Yeah. The
Doesn't have
average
a-
class size policy.
doesn't have a thing on it.
It does. It was approved, warned on December 6, 2022, and adopted by the high school board January 4th, 2023. What we want to do is simply add Part 2 BFUHS to the policy. We left the first part alone, so we don't have to redo the first policy in all the other districts. We're just adding BFUHS to the high school policies. And it talks about the minimum class size and the optimal average range. These were discussed with the coordinators at the high school and teachers and Kelly, and this is the range and minimums that they came up with, so. And what happens is the students are assigned to classes, and then they would be administration would review them by June 1st and look at the numbers there and adjust and put in a different class if they needed to keep the class sizes and ranges about that level.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. Before any questions, Jamie, anything like to add on that? You were on that too. No. Before any questions, guys, thank you both for doing the work you did. June, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. So it says on page 2 of the average class size policy, it says distance learning in AP classes, honors classes, minimum for AP class size is 5, minimum for honors is 10. What happens to the class if it has a minimum and then it drops below the minimum size after it's begun?
That's why it's reviewed by June 1st. If it's, say it was 9 instead of the 10, I'm sure that they, Kelly could bring it to the board and say, hey, we're looking at this, 1 or 2 classes being below. Or she could adjust it to have, if it's only like 4 or 5, 6 students in an honors class, she might want to adjust it to another one. Also, some of those classes are combined. The honors class is often combined with a regular, like a regular English class would be with a honors class, and they have to do some extra stuff for the honors. So you have those minimum numbers.
But that doesn't answer my question. After the semester starts, the kids have 3 weeks to add or drop a class. So it's June 1st, the class may have 10 kids in it, but 3 weeks into the semester, after the kids have decided, whoa, this is over my head or below me, the class drops to below the minimum requirement. What happens to that class at that point?
We would not expect them to withdraw that class, because that's why it's by June 1st deadline as far as reviewing the numbers and stuff. And that could happen. It also could end up with it being a big increase.
Hold on a second. Andy has his hand up. Maybe he's got a helpful answer for June or another question.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So June and the rest of the board. So typically how administration would approach that is we've got to balance classes for the beginning of the year. And then as the school year begins and you look at that, there are tipping points when you're going to choose to reduce a class, but you have to look at what the greater impact is going to be on all the students. So there isn't a very clean answer like to give a number, but there is a tipping point. I think June, hearing, to be very honest with you, hearing you say that 3 weeks, students have 3 weeks to add or drop classes, that's the first I've actually heard of that. And I think that's something that as a school, we need to go back and look at, because that's not educationally sound, that 3 weeks into a class, students are looking at adjusting their schedules for a lot of the reasons that we're bringing up here today. So that will be something that I will be asking Kelly to look into.
Thank you, Andy.
I think it's, Kelly might be able to answer that. How long do they have to?
Hold
on.
Welcome. Hold on, June, why don't you go ahead with your, Andy, thank you.
At the beginning of the year, we're talking about class sizes is why. How long do they have to adjust those schedules? I thought it was only about a week, but.
I was under the assumption that after the semester starts, the kids have 2 or 3 weeks to add or drop a class.
Off the top of my head, I think it's a 2-week add drop period.
Okay.
But I can check.
So my question was, what happens if the class meets the minimum class size June 1st, but 2 weeks into the semester, the kids have dropped or whatever, and it doesn't meet it anymore?
Right. I think that's why we had set June, like we needed to find a middle path, right, that would work for
school counseling, but also students and families and teachers, right? So if 2 weeks in, if things were to drop, right? One of the things it would likely mean that we would still need to run the class unless there was an easy way to shift, right? So I'm thinking, for example, if there was an Algebra 1 class running and that same section was running at the same time and there was capacity to kind of merge the two, then of course we'd look at that. But again, we would likely just run it for the duration of the term. Okay. So, thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
And my other question was, on the last page, it says AP classes, the minimum size is 5, and in parentheses, it says excluding calculus. I think if we're gonna exclude calculus, we need to put a calculus section and say, what is the minimum for calculus class? And what is the optimal average for, if we're gonna exclude that, in parentheses, in my opinion, it should be listed, how many kids would we run a calculus class for one kid, or do we need 3 or whatever?
We were kind of thinking afterwards that maybe 3 was a good number. The reason for that is calculus builds on all of the others. You have to take algebra, you have to take geometry, you have a pre-calculus and all of the things that build up to your calculus classes. So you don't always get as many students that are able to handle those in a year. You could put a minimum of 3. We can add that in there if the board wants to, because we've had it posted and we can add that. If they didn't have the 3, then I would assume, and I'm maybe speaking a little out of turn, but and based on our discussions, that you would then possibly do maybe like a college CCV calculus class that was teacher supported here, or you could do an independent study that was supported here. But that's why we left calculus out, was because of that building and the requirements to get to there. Whereas your other classes, your social studies and your some of your science ones and your English, you can take those at different points. There isn't that requirement of building on it.
Thank you. Deb has her hand up first. You can go next, Mary, if that's okay. Deb, go ahead.
You're muted.
Unmute yourself. Unmute, Deb.
Oh, shoot. I lowered my hand, but didn't turn on. Yeah.
And you have to yell at us because you guys are so light, we can't hear you well.
Oh, sorry. Listening to more conversation after I put my hand up indicated I had 2 questions, I guess, instead of 1. One indicates that based upon the conversation we're currently having, more language is needed in this policy in order to understand the drop add, what happens if classes go below the minimum during the school year, what is the value of having a minimum if we're going to violate the minimum. That's 1. And 2, if as June said, if there's an exclusion of calculus for a specific reason, I understand the specific reason, it should have a category separate from the AP. And that also it should have a minimum. And I'm thinking we pay a teacher to do calculus for 3 people. That's a question. But really, I think more language is needed in order to make this appropriate so it's understood, because clearly the board members don't understand what happens when that all gets shifted around. And it needs to be something that Andy doesn't question either. So it needs to be done in cooperation with his and Kelly's understanding of what happens. So the board is clear what happens when we go below the minimum set. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Mary?
My question's about maximums. With the first page, they taught you have a section where it lists BSA, whatever, number. It says minimum, maximum. Why isn't there a maximum included in the high school class size? As I would be really curious.
We didn't do a maximum for any of them. We did a minimum and an optimal average range.
I read the heading.
Yep. Because the policy, what the state requires is those 2 areas.
But on the first page, it talks about minimum, maximum class size. will use VSBA Rule 2121.2 to guide procedures for minimum maximum class sizes.
Optimal, should be optimal.
I just find it confusing.
Okay, let me find it.
So I can help answer some of that. I remember when we first started the budget process, we were looking at how many students were in each class, and then the word maximum was the word that we were hung up on. So that's how we got here, is we wanted to have a minimum expectation of how many kids were going to be in that class. To help answer that, I'm not sure if that
Okay.
does answer you.
It's, the word didn't get changed, and since it's just a wordsmithing, because it's under minimum and optimal school, it should be minimum optimal class size.
That'll solve the problem. Okay.
And
Thank you.
so just
I missed that.
from my point of view, I think this is a great first step. I believe this policy had April or something like that, didn't it? Wasn't it earlier? We went with June, so to kind of prevent that changing of classes, and it gave the guidance department and the students a little bit longer to kind of figure things out. It was kind of middle of the road. And I think one of Andy's things was the later we could get it, the better, and then we would know for better scheduling. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I think that was part of what we're trying to do. Better education for the students. So.
Yeah, no, that's correct, Jason. And I think again, the big piece is, and the board can always, revisit this, but, and as administration, we need to provide, ranges of where class sizes are. But at the beginning of the school year, once you've started to build your schedule, you just have to look at, just kind of what's been brought up. If there's an opportunity to combine classes, we're going to try and do that. But we have to make, the best decisions that are educationally sound for our students.
Thank you. So where do we go from here, Priscilla and Jamie? What's the?
Do you want to put in excluding calculus, which is at 3?
My opinion,
is that-
we're a board of
I'm
everybody,
asking the
but
board.
yeah.
That was kind of, Kelly, what we discussed, right?
So why don't
We can put calculus equals 3, and then we can pass this because we've warned it and people have been
So are you
looking at
making a
I did
motion?
make a motion already.
Thank you. Can you repeat that motion for us?
I made the motion to approve the policy on class and minimum and optimal class sizes for the high school part 2,
And then calculus as well?
and calculus at 3.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. What Priscilla said, minimum, maximum, calculus plus 3. Optimal.
Minimum optimal.
All right, any questions on the motion? Rob, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I guess I would like to, with that change, ask our principal and superintendent how they feel about that. Is that something that flows within what the conversation has been?
Thank you, Rob.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for doing that.
That's why I looked at her and asked before I did it.
I wasn't there, so I think here we ought to ask that question.
Thank you.
Good question. Deb, have a vote on the floor.
Yeah, I don't agree that we should, this is just discussion of the motion. I don't agree that we should move on this until language has been corrected and we're clear moving forward. I do believe that still some confusion for board members concerning the language used for this, and it needs to be corrected and represented before we adopt it.
Okay, so what's your vote?
Nay.
Thank you. Mary?
Nay.
David?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, with the corrections.
Mike?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Thank you all. All right, Priscilla or Jamie, what's next?
Okay, Jim, you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Policy F14, which is your non-resident tuition students. This is for students that are in districts that do not have a high school of their own. This is not school choice. This is for any student that would apply to our school and ask to come here. It is very similar to the policy we had previously, and it's similar to other districts. This was posted on February 1st. So we've done the time, we are just over the minimum of 10 days for it to be approved tonight. We were doing this because our time frame is coming up right now when we might have students that are applying to our school. And so we wanted something in place so that the administration had the ability to look at those students and say yes or no. We can't say yes or no to school choice students, basically. We can only do this for tuition students that are being tuitioned by their high schools from other places. But it gives us a little more leeway. It allows us to look at whether the student is one that will fit with our school, whether they're in good standing, whether they are one that hasn't just dropped out somewhere else, caused a problem somewhere else. We want students that will fit with our students and make a good effort here to do well at our school and be a good role model for our school as well. So this allows us to look at the student and determine whether they fit with us. There is an appeal process. The administration, the superintendent or designee, which would be Kelly at this point, get to make this decision. But if they are denied, they can bring it to the board, and then the board gets the final decision as to whether we would accept them. We would hear the whole thing at that point and be able to decide.
Okay, thank you. So, June,
And tuition is done through we took out all the tuition stuff because there's a policy where that's in the business office that's already set up for our other schools. We have a non-resident policy for both Westminster and for Rockingham.
thank you. So, Jamie, anything like that?
No, I thought she summarized it well.
Before I go to you, June, Kelly, why is this policy good for your building and you?
I think it allows us to ensure that folks we're welcoming into the community are going to be a good fit. So, and it gives us really clear, in line with what other districts have, a really clear kind of charge around what we can and cannot ask or can and cannot consider as we make that determination. And I think that's important that we have that, but also, families, interested families have that guidance as well. So it's transparent, clear.
Thank you. June, you have a question still?
I do. I'm just wondering, on page 2, it says that they have to be prove good standing and shall be demonstrated with the applicant shows that the student has not been legally dismissed or suspended for more than 10 days during the preceding 12 months for disciplinary reasons, and that the student is making satisfactory progress towards the completion of an approved school or home study program, and last, that the student's school attendance record presents a reasonable likelihood that the existing attendance requirements of the school district will be met. My question is, if the kid is coming in from a home school, how are they going to prove that, or how are you going to be able to check that, because they could be homeschooled because of disciplinary actions? So that was my question.
I think some of those pieces would come through in the conversation with the family. I think absolutely that could be true. I think we would look at, we would look at their homeschool, program, right, in consultation with the counselors, like what is it they've completed, what is it they're looking to get out of the, experience, right? Sometimes I've seen this time and time again, not necessarily here, but in prior schools, right, that sometimes the environment isn't a good fit, right? And so I think that's important that we keep an open mind and always work to include, not to exclude, if that makes sense.
But you're confident that you'd be able to, okay.
Thank you, Kelly. So Priscilla, did you have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, I didn't make one for that one, I'm sorry, I will make one. I would make a motion that we approve the policy F14, which is admission of non-resident tuition students.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, we have a motion on the floor. Deb, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
David?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes?
June?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
All right. That was so fast, you can't even remember that. All right, do we have any others, Priscilla?
Yeah, I have more to say anyway. Policy update. We also worked on school choice, transferring students, and the capacity for this. Basically, we looked at the statute and we wrote out the beginning. I drafted basically some of it and sent it to Jamie and Kelly to go over. There's some questions that still need to be answered. That's why it hasn't been posted and why we haven't finalized it. We are looking at limiting the number of new transferring students to other schools to 10 in a year. Or if we fell below 200 students at our school, then the number would be reduced to 5% of enrollment. Because at that point, it would be less than 10 students that we would have at that point. And total transferring students shall not exceed 10% of all resident high school students. At this point, that's about 32 students. That means that if we had 10 this year and 10 next year, 10 the year after, we'd be at 30, and you could not do 10 the following year because you would end up at 40. That's a lot of students going out from our high school, and that's why we did that. And then we have to look at the capacity for incoming students. There were some questions that we needed answered. The statute says that we could look at stuff that the state is doing to help us with determining that capacity. And I actually had called them, and she said, well, we don't have to update that every year, and referred me to this place, which I've looked at some of it, but we still need some questions answered. Maybe ones that we can't possibly accept at this level. Do we want to limit it to the same capacity as our school choice kids going out, coming in? Is accepting 32 too much for taxpayers or room in our building or classes? There are a bunch of different reasons that we are allowed to look at and change the capacity. Maybe the program, the particular program it doesn't allow us to have that many different programs. Maybe the space in the rooms are not enough to have that. Although as large as our classrooms were supposed to have been built for, we shouldn't have a problem, but who knows. So anyway, that's where we're at for that one. The lottery system also requires that a non-discriminatory lottery system be used if requests to transfer to or from our high school exceeds the allowable number of students, and that is something that the board has to determine and set up in consultation with the administration. So, and then we could also waive those limits by the board is allowed also. So that's where we're at on that one. On our agenda for Thursday is that policy, school choice, transferring students and capacity, which is listed as sending, entering students. We have substitutes on there, and we have class credits on there. Those are the three things that have been referred to policy. So those are the policies that we'll be working on this Thursday, the 15th at 12 o'clock. That's when our next meeting is, and that's been warned, and the agenda should be out there.
Thank you. Anything else on that, Jane? Thank you both for your dedicated work with that, and Kelly, thank you as well for being involved.
And that's at the super's office, the central office.
At Andy's office. All right. Okay. Up next, we have an update on fall coaches. Is Connor around?
He is
Was before.
prepping for a game at the moment, but he had prepared a statement based on the question. So I don't know, Andy, did you want to read that? Would you like me to read it?
I think he's comatose from the sun.
No, I lost my thing here. So yeah, Connor is prepping for a game right now. So but I did ask him just to write up some bullet points just so you all know that they did go through an evaluation process with all the ball coaches and while it's unfortunate that we've experienced departures, notably the JV field hockey coach and assistant football coach, they're actively working to fill these positions. So they did do a review, and they're going to follow the same review for the winter sports, which is they utilize a student athlete feedback form. There's personal evaluations that take place there, and then he has in-person meetings with each coach, and then there's a postseason reflection that goes through. Also, the head coach is responsible for reviewing their assistants and getting that back to Connor. So that same process happened in the fall, and he'll continue that process into the winter, and try and be consistent to go into the spring as well. And then I also just asked him on an update on the old jerseys and kind of what's going on that. So all of that stuff is stored up high, kind of in that. It wasn't affected by the water damage, but it's in that area. So getting access to it was delayed because of all the work that was going around in the auditorium. So they haven't been able to pull everything down, but he needs to pull it down and get it all inventoried. So that's been delayed right now. So.
Thank you. Is there anything else to add? Oh, yeah. June, do you have any questions? This was your ask.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good luck to Connor and good luck to the girls varsity playing tonight, right? Home. If we get out of here at 7, we can go watch the game. All right. Up next, new business for discussion, action items. Articles for presentation and annual meeting outline informational. Andy, I was here last year, but it seemed like yesterday, but I forgot kind of what the annual meeting's like. Is it question and answer, or is it kind of like I know I did my statement, but can you refresh me? So I kind of want to give some direction tonight and seek feedback from our board.
I may have to lean on Mr. Clark and his knowledge, because I think he's been around a couple of years, so he might remember better. But I believe typically the board has an opportunity to read. They read those each articles and speak on each one of them. But I believe the public does have a right to ask questions. But Mr. Clark, would that be correct?
Well, Andy, I think you're more or less correct. High school annual meeting is actually run by a moderator who's a former board member here, Don, I have his last name, Caponcelli, thank you. Don Caponcelli. And it operates in the same format the town meeting does. Don will, of course, read the boilerplate, and then he will begin his agenda, going through it. If there are motions that are made on the floor, then Don will be looking for a maker of the motion and a seconder. There will be discussion, and most of the time a vote gets called. There is also customarily during high school annual meeting an informational presentation of the budget, because it is, I believe, actually statute, Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or Dave or Priscilla, who know this stuff pretty good. It is statute that the board needs to hold essentially an informational meeting on the budget, and I believe the high school annual meeting performs that function as well. And we should really have a 50-50 pool and place a bet on how many people will actually show up. It's been a pretty sparse crowd since we stopped voting the Union High School budget off the floor. I think that's largely the picture, Jason, although I think there is a wrinkle around whether or not we will need to meet again to actually ratify the business which has taken place at high school annual meeting, as well, I understand, as the elections which take place on town meeting day, Tuesday, March 5th. So those meetings, the entirety of the high school annual meeting, and also elections, and I believe Rockingham town meeting as well, if I understand it correctly, will essentially be informational and will require ratification 30 days hence.
So,
We'll vote on everything just like we, right, you just have to ratify it. They're also looking into whether we do it as, like Rockingham does it with the town, like we do, and you've done it separate, so we can probably plan on our, the high school one here being separate anyway, but you have to ratify it so many days after.
So I have a statement from the lawyer.
Can you explain to everybody first?
Yeah, hold on, time out, slow down. I'm gonna let Andy speak first, since how he politely has his hand up.
So Jason, you might be reading exactly what I'm about to say, but it is my understanding that the actual boards do not have to ratify that vote. It's the voters have to ratify that vote 20 days later, and it will be the requirement of Rockingham to hold that. And so it's not something that you all need to worry about.
Bingo. All right, so before we get into that, I want to back that a little bit. So I believe that we are a team. So these are the positions that we hold. I'm the chair, junior to vice chair, and you've took a lot of notes for WNESU. So if there's any WNESU stuff that comes up from the town, I'd like you to have first crack at answering that.
Okay, I'll do my best.
So you have some homework. Thank you. Mike and Deb, you guys are the warrant signers. I'm sorry, Andy, did you still have a question, or? Put your hand down. Time out. Mike and Deb, you guys are the warrant signers, so if people have questions about bills and not being paid, I'd like you guys to have those answers, so be prepared for that. Buildings and grounds, so it's Mike, Rob, David, and myself. I'm the chair for that, so if somebody has questions for that, I'll be leaning on you guys, but I'll try to answer them the best I can with we're in collaboration. Budget is Mike, Jason, and David. And David, if people have questions on that, you're going to present, and you should probably be ready to present ahead of time. Finance is Mike. Any questions on that? Jamie, you're the clerk. So if they have questions on that and what your duties are, and you're supposed to follow up on Jim as well. So that's part of the gig.
Follow up on what?
Jim Vizina. That's part of what the clerk does. And take notes, and you're third in command. So if me and June are hit by a bus, you're in charge.
Win the lottery.
Deb, you're the assistant treasurer. I misspoke. Deb, you're supposed to be Jim. So technically, this board doesn't, you would be the business manager if there is no Jim, Deb. So you would have to, if there's questions on those things, you're gonna have to answer those. Jamie, I misspoke. That is Deb, that's not you.
Okay, great.
Tech is Mike and David. June, your negotiations for this board. If people have questions on negotiations, you can't answer them. And policy is Jamie and Priscilla. So I just want to make sure we all have a chance to answer those questions. And if you're the chair of those committees, I think it's important that you tell them all what the great work you guys have done. And I think that we all have done a lot of great work in my tenure since April or May, whenever that was. So thank you for that. Now to the lawyer stuff. So I'm just going to read you what he said, okay? And then so the question. So what happened is our clerk missed the deadline to get the stuff submitted to correctly.
Our town clerk.
Town clerk, not Jane. So there's going to need a ratification after the votes that the people do, which is timeline. All right, so this is how it starts. On the vote, on the revote, it is a single question that covers all the results on an individual question voted on March 5th. You need to have a special meeting and it needs to be warned 30 days notice, right? Single question is, Article 1, shall the action taken at the meeting of this district held on March 5th, in spite of the fact that the warning was not posted for the required 30 days, and any action or action of the district officers or agents pursuant thereto be readopted, ratified, and confirmed? So it's a basic yes or no question. The answer is yes or no. If yes, it is as a March 5th vote was properly warned and all the votes stand. If no, then the March 5th results are void and you need to have a new election listing all of the individual voting articles, which is properly warned. Okay. And so I asked him, I said, hey, can you give me some statute behind that? Just because I know how my board operates. The current Rockingham board members, so I asked for this specific high school. So the current Rockingham board members, so Rockingham is myself, Mike, Rob, Priscilla, that's it, and Deb. So are duly elected until successor members are elected and sworn in. 16 VSA 423A. Each town school district shall have a school board consisting of 3 directors, one of whom shall be elected by ballot at each annual meeting of the town, yada, yada, yada. All right, and then he said, as the Rockingham board members for the Bellows Falls Junior High School reps from Rockingham continue to be official until the new election and swearing in. So after the election, let's say we're all voted out, we're still on the board until it's ratified, whatever that timeline was that 30 days or 20 days, something like that. I said, thank you. So I said, so basically you're saying the old crew retains authority until the new crew is validated. His answer, yes. He said, the district can't really function without a board, so you keep the seats until you have new board members. If people disagree, they would like to file a lawsuit, and if a judge say the law means something other than what it plainly says, I think that is highly unlikely. And then he went into some other stuff. So that's our lawyer's opinion. So this is an unfortunate situation. So after the March 5th, I still, whether I'm here or not, I still have a duty, and I'm going to continue that duty until validated or not. And I still plan to have meetings and do the right thing for the students regardless. So there you have it. Deb? You have a question, Deb?
Yeah, well, sort of an add-on to this. This came up today at the VLCT on Zoom meeting about all the things going on, about different bills and everything, including what's going on at the school district levels because of the budget possible revote with 127. So that was brought up, and they asked me for more information, and now VLCT sent it to their attorney. There'll be I'll get an answer back, which I'll forward off to you, concerning the whole thing about holding seats until the new ratification, which would occur within 20 or 30 days, whatever that is, after elections have occurred, which is going to be kind of odd, but so they aren't sure that makes sense. So I know you already asked the attorney, our attorney, but that is of course a legal opinion. The LCT might have a different legal opinion. So if it's different, I'll let you know, but they were confused by that piece of the law. So, and it, again, like I said, came up today at the BLCT Zoom meeting.
Well, the easy answer is we just gotta all win, right?
Turn that
We
up.
don't know what she said.
It's my computer.
I couldn't hear her at all.
You could-
Well, is it coming out of, it's not coming out of the owls, is it?
We're gonna try to turn you up a little bit, Deb.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know, I can hear
Everybody-
Andy, I can hear you guys just fine, including Andy, but, and my
Might
volume's
just be
up. So.
our computer.
Anyway, VLCT said their attorney's gonna look at that because they don't, they're not clear about the holding your seats after an election has occurred, which may have released you from your duties. So they might have a different opinion than Pietro. That's all I'm saying. Did you hear that?
See if it's any louder.
I heard you.
Okay.
So I'm just going by what he said, and he also gave some, which I will send out to all of you folks. He also gave some statute, and he said that people can get a lawyer and challenge it, but he's reading the law, so.
Can you just touch that to get it?
Oh, no. Nicole, you're doing a great job.
You are doing awesome.
All right, anything else on that? We'll move forward. Okay. All right, principals report, informational.
Yeah.
That's right, fire away.
Couple pieces to just kind of throw out there. One, on the PCB front, I think there's a lot of good traction now that the auditorium water snafu has eased a little bit. We are proceeding with our quarterly air sampling that is scheduled to begin next Tuesday through Thursday. So VHV, our mitigation consultants, will be in the building conducting those quarterly air sampling. The other thing that we did finalize is our source characterization work. So again, the state approved the plan. VHV will be on site again on the 28th of February through the 1st of March. And so that's really, again, where they're going to be getting into sample some of the materials throughout the building that they feel in consultation with the University of Iowa data may be contributing to PCBs in the air quality. So we are told in both cases that we should have the test results within 3 to 4 weeks. We're no longer pushing for that kind of rush sampling, which does come with an added cost, but we should have, I think, a pretty clear update by the end of March on both fronts in terms of how the air quality is and what may be the primary culprits for sources in the building. So related to that, actually, Andy just sent out an invitation, so I'm not sure if you want to speak more to that, Andy, but this Thursday, we are continuing our advocacy at the state level that our school, our district, and other schools in similar positions continue to hear our concerns at the state level, not only from like a policy implementation perspective, but also in terms of the financial kind of costs that are coming with this. So both Andy and I spoke alongside a handful of other superintendents at the House Education Committee about a month or so ago. And then this Thursday evening, I don't know if Andy's going, I just saw this, I'll head up Thursday night to Montpelier to join some additional advocacy work there to kind of speak, again, out on behalf of the community. So Andy, do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, that's, thank you, Kelly. I mean, it's just, we've asked the state senators if they would join us for a conversation around that. Majority of them have accepted. I've invited, Senator Hassim and Senator Harrison, from our area to meet and have that discussion. So that's supposed to take place at up at the VSA. It's not a testimony; it's just a conversation. So.
Elsewhere in the building, so again, ServPro, the company that was on site supporting us with the water flooding issues that we had in the building about 6 weeks ago now, they're off-site, so now we're really just moving into that cleanup work. So they are out of the building, heat in that space is back down to normal operating conditions, which is allowing us to proceed with that air sampling with VHB. Now we're really navigating the kind of what next, right? So looking at, the water damage that was done to the walls and some of the paper that was there, or some of the wallpaper that was there. Certainly the carpets were harmed, I would say, in the process of that cleanup work. All of the seats in the auditorium were taken out so they could clean the ceilings and access some of those waterlogged spaces. So there's the question of getting those put back in and the kind of safety implications of that work and getting it addressed, as well as some of the damage to the stage. Again, that damage to the stage was not from the water, that was done from, there's some pieces like that we're still sorting through. We were going to have some folks on site tomorrow morning to kind of take us through those final steps. Unfortunately, due to the weather, they're postponing until next Tuesday. So unfortunately, I won't have an update for probably another week or so on the timeline and or kind of financial dimensions to what's remaining for the school. I do believe the server that was damaged as part of that flooding has been fully paid for. I'm not sure if it's on site or where we're at with that. I just know that that's a bit further along in the replacement. And
that's on insurance, correct?
That's on insurance, correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. So that's, again, that server that's here in the building serves the district. So it's of critical importance that it be operational. So that's good. Again, the work with Hutter Construction is fully operational. Their superintendent, Lex, is on site along with his crew, and they have begun their work in earnest over in the A wing. So that's really above the kind of shop, AEP, and portions of the cafeteria. They'll be working doing some pretty significant roof-based work, removing some of the old HVAC units over the winter break next week. So they're really trying to prioritize that work when folks are not really in the building. So that's great. No hiccups so far, knock on wood. And the last piece that I updated the Building and Grounds Committee on is, that catalyst monitoring system that we've been waiting on for our prime generator is in, it's installed. Now we're moving on to stack testing, which is a necessary step before we can get the permits that we need from the EPA and the state to then consider re-enrolling into that demand response program with Green Mountain Power and hopefully reduce some of our costs there. But again, we've been in a bit of a holding pattern, I think about 9 months now until that part came in from Milton Cat. So it's nice to be moving again on that front. And we expect to do that catalyst stack testing probably within the next 30 days or so. I had asked our consultant to update his materials and kind of timeline on what's coming next, and we'll share that as soon as I have that. So I'll pause there. Any questions on the PCB, water damage, roof, HVAC? It's all very interconnected at this point.
Thank you.
Yep. I was asked just to speak briefly to a recap on first semester grades. I personally really appreciated digging into each of the individual report cards. I don't anticipate having the bandwidth to do that every quarter, right, or progress, moving forward, but it was really helpful to me to kind of have that kind of broad, kind of 30,000-foot view on the work that's happening in the building and kind of what that looks like for our students and the quality of the feedback, the type of feedback that's being given to students and their kind of primary supports at home. So I learned a lot, actually. So, and kind of kicking off some conversations with both with IT, with Shannon Howe, who's the newer IT member, who's really a Power School whiz. She's, I would say, Power School genius in really helping us to kind of reconfigure and tweak, the parent portal, the student portal, and how those report cards come through, right, in a kind of cleaner, more accessible way. And just kind of in general how our systems work behind the scenes, which has been really, really helpful. But also kind of, actually tomorrow morning, I have a longer conversation with the school counselors just about some of the policies and how those do come through in our reporting. So one thing that really stood out to me was just, our use of an incomplete policy, for example. And just it felt at times like it was a bit inconsistent in its application, and just wanted to kind of shoring up our policy and our transparency and how that is awarded in our program of studies and the supports that are offered to students who do get an incomplete. and just making sure that we're doing everything that we can on that front. So there's some kind of, I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit and dismiss its significance, but there's some pieces like that that we'll be chipping away at. The other thing that kind of stands out to me, you know, as part of our targeted learning focus, I think many of you got to meet Brett Bishop, right? And the district's work with focus schools. In this building and our instructional leadership team, we're really focusing on moving into next year and how we can strengthen our support to students in their ability to show initiative and responsibility for learning, right? And when you really unpack what our actionable space is around that as adults, it's really in how we give feedback, right? How are we kind of mentoring, nurturing those qualities that we're seeking from students, right? And so that obviously goes part and parcel to report cards, and kind of how we're talking about and assessing proficiencies in particular. So I think there's some more work that we have to do as a building to more clearly provide clearer and more actionable feedback to students and to families as they navigate their space in the building. On the whole, though, it was, I think, a really impressive engagement from our students, really impressive kind of quality and breadth of program that was offered by the teachers. It was a really neat exercise, I would say, in doing that. So we can keep you posted on that. And then again, I'll pause there because I think the next part gets into graduation pieces. So.
Jim, go ahead.
When should parents expect the report cards?
So those were all pushed through the portal. So they.
How long ago? I spoke to guidance middle of last week, and they said they were just finishing up a couple things, and we should be getting them.
Yeah, the tech grades, because of the weather, I think were late coming through. The goal was the Friday prior. They should all be there as of Monday, I think midday, if memory serves me.
So today?
No, last week.
Oh.
Yep, all of that should be in there. There were we had previewed in the fall, kind of in line with other buildings in the district, moving more exclusively to that kind of parent portal and reducing the kind of paper communication, right? Just to provide real-time access to how students were doing. And so unless a family requested hard copy, all of that information is coming through the portal.
So can you explain to parents how, if they have their parent portal up and running, where they would find it?
Sure, we had put out, I'd be happy to show you. Be happy to relay.
I am.
Be happy to, yeah, we have a great one pager that we had, I think we had it out at the open house, if memory serves me, and put it out in a couple of the newsletters, but I can pull that out, and certainly if others who are listening are struggling with that, we can absolutely push that out again for access.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Can you say again, in case anybody didn't hear you out in TV land, you looked at every single report card of every student in this school?
I did.
That's impressive.
I learned a lot. It was really, I felt it was really nice to be able to hold like a very concentrated lens on our students and to do something that was not building infrastructure related. So it was, I really valued that opportunity.
Yeah.
And yeah, I learned a lot from it.
So
I'm impressed.
I've been here
Nice job.
3.5, 4 years, and I don't think I've ever heard a leader say that out loud. They might have, but I think it's, I don't know, I'm impressed. So, Andy, long-term contract. What else you got?
I was just going to pause there because I think there's bullet point C.
Yep,
So I'll pause.
Deb, I don't have one of these for you. We just got this today. Yeah, that'd be great if you email to Deb. This is what Kelly's gonna go over next. So it's
Okay.
not hiding anything, just this is what's coming up.
No, I get it.
Thank you.
Deb, I just sent you a link.
It's in your email right now, Deb.
I got it.
What is this, Kelly?
So this is, I would say, work in progress. I think it's important to note that right at the outset. And I think is intended to be a snapshot of where we're at, kind of as a community, as we're unpacking what we have provided or what we are providing in terms of credit expectations. And some, I kind of want to walk you through some of the points about and conversations that we're having internally, and then just kind of maybe end with some of the places we intend to go with this. I think one of the things that I've been doing alongside reviewing of our report cards is reviewing programs of studies from across the state of all different types of high schools. Really digging into their credit requirements, right? And also their kind of scope of studies at the departmental level. So there's a lot I think we need to sit with as a community before we kind of make a firm kind of commitment to how we're going to proceed. Because there's some things we're doing really, really well. And I think there's some things that we might want to be inspired by that other districts are doing. So what we have here, again, is just a kind of a snapshot summary, just to reorient folks. Currently, our credit requirement is 28. As Andy has outlined in prior communications, that is one of the highest kind of numbers in the state of Vermont at the moment. I think in looking at most programs, it falls anywhere from as low as 20, though I would say that's pretty rare, to that kind of 23, 24 to 26 tends to be the sweet spot in terms of how other schools are operating. I'll kind of go department through department. So almost I think every school I've looked at so far does hold out a 4 credit expectation around ELA. I think one conversation that we need to have as a community is around math. So at the moment, all the programs of studies I've looked at so far do hold a 3 credit versus a 4 credit. I think we're the only one in the state that holds a 4 credit expectation. That being said, one of the things I think I've heard from several board members in prior meetings how much they value and how much our students and families really value the financial literacy course in particular, right? So one of the things that some of these schools do is they might have a 3 credit mathematics requirement or like credit requirement, but that financial literacy course is also a requirement, but it's just part of that larger expectation in terms of senior project, PLP, community service. So it is like an additional credit to that 3, if that makes sense. But I do think that's something we need to dig into, starting at the departmental level a bit. Social studies, again, across the street seems to be right on par with that 3 credits, same with science. Fine arts, again, some schools move a little bit differently. They have something, either a fine art or an applied art in some cases, but that 1 credit expectation seems to be pretty on point. Same with physical education, 1.5 credits. I'll come to one thought, again, that we need to talk about as a community, but as it pertains to athletics counting in part for a PE requirement, so I'll come to that in a moment. Health, again, as I've noted before, a lot of schools have struggled with this requirement, specifically in the hiring of a full-time health teacher. But it does seem like the general consensus is a 0.5 health requirement versus a full credit. So you'll see that noted here. I think another thing that I think is 50-50, right, is the requirement around foreign language. I personally have a pretty strong bias that students who come through high school do have some exposure to a foreign language. I think that's really critical. And I would love to see us at some point offer a more robust language kind of portfolio of options. So that is a goal, I think, long term. But I do think it's important to note that, only about half the schools have that as a core requirement. That being said, I think for our students, which remain in the majority, who want to go on to a post-secondary education, foreign language is a requirement of admission in almost all cases, right? So even if we were to drop foreign world language, right, as a requirement and move it over to an elective, I still think most of our students would end up taking it and would absolutely need it. So I think that's just a really important thing to note. The other thing to consider, again, I'm learning to find the silver lining in things this year, but, just given the constraints around resources at the moment, if we were to consider removing world language as a requirement over to an elective, it could allow us to kind of take the current language offerings a bit further, right? So I think at the moment we go up to Spanish 3, it could potentially allow us to go up to Spanish 4, which I think is important to note. It's one of the number one pieces of feedback I hear from families is a request for more rigor in our foreign languages in particular. So this could allow, it could cater to slightly less students, but allow those students to go further, which again is something that we are getting requests for. The elective requirements, again, currently at 9.5, just putting forward 9 just to kind of get us closer to that 26 kind of thing. So I think a couple more points and then I'll open it up for questions. I do think it's very sound, wise for the board to consider kind of a credit continuum, right? And to not lock ourselves into one number, right? I think for some students coming through the program who have a very clear sense of what they'd like to do after graduation, if that vision does not include post-secondary education right out of the gate, it could be that 25 credits is perfectly appropriate and does provide a really well-rounded, really robust kind of portfolio and exposure to some really foundational pieces, with the understanding that, again, our students who are wanting and are clear or even think they want to go on to a post-secondary, they're going to need 28 credits, right? And so, again, I think in the interest of supporting the premise of flexible pathways and giving multiple options, I do think our credits should align with that kind of continuum as well. Some pieces that we still need to dig into, right? Obviously, community service. I think most schools landed that 40-hour requirement. Some are as low as 30. I think one thing that I'm personally really interested in is, schools are required to have a PLP process. A lot of schools have that be a credit-bearing opportunity. And I think there's a lot of merit in our exploring that as well. So for example, schools who offer credit for that PLP work each year typically award like a 0.25 credit for each year. And I do think that that could help with student engagement. I think that could help students feel a little bit more invested in it. I think the PLP work is one of the most critical things that we do and will continue doing in the building to really help support student voice and choice and just student agency. So I think, again, if we add a little credit, add a little carrot to it to promote stronger engagement with that from students in particular, I think it's a win-win. Again, it tends to fall in the elective bucket. I think one of the things that we have been doing and will continue to do is really explore ways for students to earn credit outside of the kind of 8 to 3 o'clock schedule that we have in the building. So again, coming back to physical education, there's about half the schools do offer some portion of that credit to be earned through participation in athletics. I think that's worth a conversation, given the volume of students that we have that do participate in athletics. With the move from driver's ed being offered in the building to that voucher system, right? There's a lot of students who are doing that on the weekends and the evenings over the summer, right? We can absolutely award credit for that as we have in years past. So again, I think that's another opportunity for some external, outside the box kind of credit opportunity. Certainly we're continuing to build up our work-based learning, which is also a credit-bearing opportunity, and Heather continues to report, strong uptick in engagement and interest in that work. So I think that's noteworthy as well. I think the other thing, which is personally, I think this is really exciting. I think I can speak on behalf of at least Andrea in school counseling, and I sense her enthusiasm on this too, is RVTC has just completed a review of their program of studies. And typically, as it stands, our students who engage in those tech programs in their year one, they get 4 elective credits. And then year 2, they kind of get either an elective. Sometimes when we were able to crosswalk the proficiencies between the programs and our expectations, we were able to award an embedded math or on occasion an English credit. One of the things that we just got, I think it was late Thursday or Friday of last week, is this beautiful draft that RBTC put together, where they've done a lot of the legwork crosswalking, identifying all the proficiencies that are offered in each one of their programs. And so we need to sit as a community at the departmental level and say, how do we feel about awarding a math credit here, or an English credit, or an art credit, right? And so I do believe that there's going to be some expanded credit opportunities, particularly around those core academics that can be awarded to students who opt through the tech program. So again, I think that's a really good development. And the last thing I'll note is that one of the things that used to exist in our program of studies, I'm not sure why, but it kind of dropped off a couple of years ago. We're working on bringing that back. Is as part of the PLP process and just general engagement and support to students and families, is being really clear at the outset. You know, what is it that you hope to take away from your kind of path here at the high school, and then trying to help kind of map out a program of studies for them, right? So if a student's coming in and they're really clear that they want to get their degree and go right into the workforce, then we're going to work with them to kind of map out a program of studies that aligns with their vision. Same with the student coming in who's really clear that they want to go on to a competitive Ivy League school. Great, right at the outset, we're going to sit with them and map out a program of studies and the related kind of credit and pathway opportunities that they have. So we're going to, I think, commit to doing a better job of being transparent about those pathways and the requirements that go with it, both in our program of studies, but also in our outreach to students and families. So yeah, again, that's a snapshot of where we're at. There's still a lot of really important conversations that need to be had, but I very much feel like we're moving in the right direction.
Great. I know there's a bunch of questions.
Sure.
June, I'm going to skip you for a second. Priscilla, do you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we were just going to start really hopefully talking about this in policy on Thursday. So this is kind of a nice prelude to that. And I'm hearing you say that there's a lot of questions still that we need to answer. I think one of the main ones for me is the fact that our state has kind of gone to proficiencies, and you were saying River Valley Tech has mapped out where their proficiencies are. I think before we change the numbers or changed any of that, because really what we're looking at is proficiencies, no specific honest number that's there. I think we would need to make sure that we have those embedded and where they're embedded so that we are sure that we've got the right requirements. Is that an accurate portrayal?
Yeah, and I think that's a really necessary part of what needs to come next. And I just would urge caution, and like, that's not going to happen in the next couple weeks or even months, right? I think that's that vision of kind of reassessing where we're at in terms of what we're offering, to include the transferable skills, right, that we're supposed to be kind of nurturing as students come through the program. You know, in some of these, as I've been looking at some of these other high schools, that's a 2 or 3 year process, right? That's really starting to get into the portrait of a graduate, which is a district-wide pre-K through 12 initiative that's not just done at the high school level, right? So I think all of that is really valuable and necessary work. But I think, yeah, that level of work is not going to come to fruition in the next couple of weeks. So I think that's just important to name.
Any other questions before June? Deb, go ahead.
Oh, I thought there would be more questions from other people. It's a two-parter, sort of on the same subject. So am I mistaken in hearing that all tech credits are calculated through electives only? Is that a yes or no?
No, the first year was electives. The second year of engagement comes with some electives and some embedded core credits, so math or English, I think historically. What this new kind of document is gonna allow us to do is to do a deeper dive and see if we can offer more math, science, English, art, right? If we can expand some more of those core requirements being honored through the tech program. So that's what we need, that's what we're gonna need to figure out.
Okay, and thank you. And my second question is then, based upon what schedule I'm seeing here, and I guess I was not aware of this before, 33.3% of the entire graduating years for 4 years of credits come exactly from electives. A third, which I find astounding. And I don't, and I guess from my perspective, I don't understand all of the things that electives cover. Now I understand that some of it's tech. You know, I see some of the other stuff here, like driving and that sort of thing, taking driver's ed. But I don't understand what all the things that are in electives are. I thought more of the credits would be in basic education, like reading and writing and, you know, and sciences and math, you know, places that there's maybe some weaknesses in. So that, I guess that was, but I didn't understand what all the electives are. Is there a place on the website I can go find out what all the electives are?
Yeah, so our programs of studies for this year is published on the website. I'm happy to send that around for ease of access as well. And then once we get our draft for next year complete, I can send that around too. But in the interim, I'm happy to send that.
Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Sally. Jim?
I have two. Number one, my first question is, the state of Vermont Department of Education requires 22 credits.
So my understanding is they have actually scrubbed that guidance.
Okay.
I recall seeing, to your point though, I recall seeing a tangible number last year at some point, right? When I was making the transition into public ed. That has since, I think, evaporated in large part to kind of really push the recognition or folks embracing the proficiency model, right? So credits remain for many a very kind of, that Carnegie unit, right? Very time-bound piece. And the state is really trying to push folks more firmly into that proficiency model. So I think they do have, however, if you look in the ed quality standards, I think that's the document, there are some very specific points in there, going to physical education, for example. They do say students are required to have, I think, 1.5 years of opportunity in physical education. So that's not a credit, right, per se, but there are some really clear points of guidance that come from that document as well. I'm also happy to send that around with the program of studies if that's helpful.
Okay. And my second question is, we send kids to Brattleboro Tech as well.
Correct.
So the proficiencies have only been reviewed by River Valley, which is Springfield, and not Brattleboro. So Brattleboro would still be elective credits?
That's a great question. I think we were able to do this lift because I think it was through a Perkins grant or some other grant that Scott Farr, the superintendent up there, was able to land. He was able to hire actually an additional school counselor solely to do this work, to support more flexible pathways kind of for all their sending schools. I don't know that Brattleboro has had the same bandwidth to provide that.
Okay.
I do know that most of our students, and I will check my thinking, but I anticipate this to remain true, do go to River Valley. So, yeah, I can check with counseling. Again, I've got a meeting with them in the morning about how that embedded credit model has worked from Brattleboro as well. I imagine it followed a similar trajectory, but I'll check it for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Andy, before you go, I just wanted to, Kelly, first of all, I appreciate you hitting that deadline that we asked you to do by having it in February. That's huge for me. You know, shows it's something I already knew you had. There's a lot of integrity, so thank you for doing that. I think it's, for me, I think it's genius. If you're gonna go down to 3 credits in math, but keep 4 and then have one of them as financial literacy, I think that's what you said. I don't know how many times I go get something and you pay cash with something, and that's an anomaly these days. Everyone's card, but then seeing a younger person or a person in general being able to count back change, think it's a lost art, and, a checkbook and just the basic stuff to, graduate high school. I think that's important. I hear that a lot, and maybe it's just because I'm old now, but that's what I hear. I think you really hit home on, being able to lower the credits and still providing a very good education for the kids. And it seems like you're very focused on the kids. So I appreciate that. And that's what's important. And I know, it does sound very interesting to me to make world language not a requirement, but a elective. And that kind of opens the door to do other things. I'm assuming maybe sign language or, whatever. That's your department, and I appreciate that. And, and I know the one thing that New Solutions told us is that our school has a plethora of electives. So it sounds like you're, as Mike would say, shuffling the chairs on the deck, so to speak, which is great. So, I appreciate the hard work, and I had it on here as an action item only because I'm not sure. I'm going to ask the board. I just want to make sure that this stays focused, whether there's a new board or not a new board going forward. I know you're a strong person, but I just want to make sure that, you're going to stay focused on that. So what's the board's pleasure? Do you think we need to have David, go ahead.
Well, actually, I deferred my slot to June, but I still had something to say here on graduation requirements.
Yeah.
And that is that I'm glad to hear the policy is about to take it up. I think that's good news. But I need to point out to this board that the Carnegie Unit is a 20th century anachronism. And we're going to see if we get a little bit more mileage out of the old clunker. And that's great, because hopefully it will allow a little bit more flexibility for kids to access the tech centers, which I think is critical and has been a problem for years in this high school ever since we went to the 28 Carnegie Unit graduation policy. However, I think that we should really be regarding any work that's done on a Carnegie Unit-based graduation policy to be strictly transitional to proficiency-based graduation requirements. And I think that we really should be working on that just as soon as this board reorganizes. So I'm not certain that action is needed on this particular item tonight, but certainly when we have a new board, I think that we need to have that discussion, because we are grossly behind the times in terms of that delivery model.
Yeah. Before Andy had his hand up for a little bit. Sorry, Andy, it's hard to see you out in Zoom land. Fire away.
Well, I guess I'm going to say it must be the distance, because David, you just said what I was going to say. So I'll leave it at that with that piece, because really, because yes, the state of Vermont is the movement is away from Carnegie units and credits, which is why you don't find those at the state level anymore if you go looking for them. But the other piece, just to kind of touch on what Deb had asked about, or I think it was Deb, about the RVTC, the work that Scott Farr has been did, that's been something he's been trying for a long time to get that crosswalk done, so that students could get courses as required credits, because it's imperative. We have kids who are going to our tech centers. They're doing quality work that is proficiency based in I'm just going to say mathematics, but in other categories as well. And they should be they should receive some type of credit for that towards graduation, not just elective credits. So I applaud what Scott has done with his team, and I believe that WRCC, if they haven't picked that up, is going to be picking that up soon.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Want to move on? All right, thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Up next, we have Buildings and Grounds Update Informational. So last week, we had a Buildings and Grounds meeting, and so we met for an hour, maybe, hour and a half tops. And so the main focus on that was to prepare us for questions and answers for the upcoming annual meeting. And the question I asked was, hopefully the voters will pass $300,000 and change to use this year on expenses or stuff that needs to be fixed at the school. And I worded it with a lawyer's help to use it this year. Because, I've seen a lot of years where it just keeps carrying over. So if you don't use it, the voters are going to have to vote again on it. So I'm assuming there's plenty to fix here with $300,000 and something. So,
Correct.
And you covered all those in the on your report. So definitely appreciate that. And I guess just be ready. Is there anything additional you'd like to throw in there?
I was remiss. I was being very literal and following the update of what was included here. But I just wanted to make sure everyone was in the loop that the science wing, which I think is incredibly exciting and important, is we're moving on that, right?
Sure.
So I think originally, again, due to PCBs, all of that was on pause, but we've resumed in earnest. And originally we had an updated timeline of mid-April. We're actually moving that back to probably the 3rd week of March. Tomorrow, actually, we'll have a series, even with the weather, we're gonna have a series of meetings with the engineers are going to be coming in to do a walkthrough, meeting with the science department, doing a final look over of the plans, making sure all the student stations in terms of gas and water and all that fun stuff kind of meets that creative vision. And yeah, so that work is fully launched as well. So.
And Andy's going to have bid specs for us, correct? Yes. You're shaking his head, yes. Good. And so, and then I'll just give, go ahead, Jean, you have a question?
I did. On the science wing, I just want to verify that there's going to be walls in
Correct.
the science department because, well, the reason I bring that up is because I was reviewing some previous meetings and it said potential walls. And I just wanted to verify, since I haven't seen the plans or anything, that there are going to be walls for safety.
I'm happy to send around, once we get the most current iteration of the plans after the meeting tomorrow, send it around, but I can confirm in the interim, there absolutely are walls. It'll be a total of 4 classrooms that are going to be constructed, and without oversimplifying too much, it's going to kind of fall along, I would say, a continuum of intensity. So the lab space at the far end, that'll be very, chemistry focused, right? Forensic science, things of that nature. We'll have a lot of student lab stations, gas, water, et cetera. And then kind of as it inches, with each classroom that comes closer to this side of the building, we've been very intentional on kind of ensuring that those spaces are appropriate for science and lab-oriented or STEM-oriented classes, but also could be thoughtfully used by any other class in the building, right? So it'll be a very kind of more general purpose space.
And Andy, you're going to have for the annual meeting, I'm envisioning the size of that TV screen, big blow-ups, what the science room's going to look like, and what the possible remodel plans are, futuristic, for the annual meeting.
So I can't verify the size that they will be, but we did ask the architect to have the prints put on poster boards so that they could be examined and put up on easels.
I could donate we have a very large printer, about yay big, that prints huge blueprints if you needed, Andy, just so you know. Anyway, thank you for that. And I think it's important to show the town, the progress that we've made in a short amount of time. And that's from all of us in this room working together. So I appreciate everyone's hard work. The other thing we talked about is, an idea that Andy had, and Mr. Stack wasn't at the meeting. And I don't think I did a great job it's hard to present Mike's information. So Mike, can you give us a, a 3-second or 3-minute download for the board of it's just an idea.
It's just right here.
Yeah, so fire away if you please.
Basically, what I was hoping to do was put a motion on the table tonight to request a permission for a study group to take a look at the use of excess land here at the high school to potentially develop housing for teachers. The concept is obviously a pipe dream at this point because there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Obviously, there's a lot going on down here at the school. Kelly and Andy have plenty going on. They don't need additional workload on their plates. So that's why I was thinking, a small, very small working group, study group, whatever you want to call it, to look into this to see if it's even possible. So that kind of in a nutshell is what I was hoping to do. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's pretty simple.
So I can answer that for you. I know I didn't make this an action item because I think it was agreed at the committee that we would bring it back to buildings and grounds and then study it some more, and then possibly, if and when it's ever ready, then to bring it to the board. So again, it's an idea. I don't think anyone should slam anyone for ideas or questions. It's kind of like if a student's raising their hand and you're constantly, put your hand down, you make fun of kids or whatever. I think there's some of that out there, and it's unfortunate. And, everyone knows that we have a lot to do here, and our number one focus is this building and the students. And then you also need to think about not just tomorrow, but you got to think 60 years from now and what potentially could happen. And that's the world that I live in. So I appreciate, you doing what you did. Andy, I think, you had a great thought, and, creative people do a lot of creative things. I mean, we at one point thought it was crazy to go to the moon, and we did it. So we can do a lot of things we put our mind to. So anything else on that, Mike, or any questions for Mike?
I would just say, from my perspective, I think that's a function of the board, is to facilitate and help to investigate things. Again, do some of the heavy lifting. There's zoning questions, there's all kinds of questions.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of permissions that would have to be established. So these are not easy and simple things, but as a member of the board, helping to facilitate these kind of things, I think, is a part of our role. So that's my suggestion. I think you should decide where and who you would want to put on this committee. I would keep it very small. I think ideally you would put somebody on the committee that is from Westminster, because the land is in Westminster. It would be important to have connections with the community in Westminster from the standpoint of zoning, et cetera, all those good things. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
So.
Yeah, you have a building and grounds committee first off, and that's where it was to be discussed and brought back to them. And so I don't think you need a separate committee. But I'm also hoping that maybe the buildings and grounds could expand that a little bit and look at who has bought land recently in our town. And maybe they should be thinking about putting that kind of housing and that kind of thing in a facility on the land that they're purchasing and doing. So that would be another option too for people to be looking at.
I think there's a lot of great ideas, and I don't disagree with you, Priscilla, at all. I think it's, I don't know, I have nothing else really to say on it. Anything else on that?
No, I just think it's a really creative idea. I think from an optics perspective, you probably are going to get pushback because people are like, why are you focusing on making it a business and not thinking about the students in the school? So I would just say, be prepared for some of that, but I think it's creative and maybe worth exploring.
Could I respond to your?
Yeah.
There's so many ways to approach this, but one of the ways to approach it is from a perspective of the school owns the land. So it's an asset that's not being utilized. So I don't think we, as a school or supervisory union, are going to go into the housing business or build housing. But there's something called the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, and what they do is they they actually buy land underneath homes, which allows people to actually afford to own the home. You know, the land can be as much as $30,000 of the down payment. So, you know, if we could help, whether it's teachers, staff, essentially anybody in the SU, with, obviously, we've got a serious housing crisis going on, affordability crisis. So I would not envision us going into the housing business. Ideally, you know, again, this is all dreams, you know, the land would stay in the hands of the school. That would help them to control not only who lives there, but also what it would be from a cost standpoint for, you know, new teachers coming in to be able to afford it. So, you know, a lot to be examined and a lot of ways to approach it, but definitely we've got enough budget issues as it is to be putting additional cost onto the school for something like this is not what I had in mind. But, you know, those are the kind of questions you obviously have to dig into.
Right.
So I think if anyone hates the idea, you should address them to Andy Haas, because it was his idea. And if anyone likes the idea, you should applaud Mike for his creativity. Anything else, guys? Moving on. All right, so next up we have the WNESU bylaws action. So Cheryl at the WNESU has made some bylaws, and she has passed them at the WNESU. Then they come to us, and they're going to go to each school. And these bylaws are basically the bylaws that we've already had, but just updated them. And they were sent out in time, so hopefully I had a chance to review them. I think it's a good idea to have standard rules that we follow. We also have our norms that we have as well, so these run in conjunction with that. These don't replace one or vice versa. It's just, these are the rules that we govern ourselves by, if that makes any sense. So I'd like to put a motion on the floor to adopt these bylaws and go with that. Would anybody like to make the motion? I can as well, whatever.
I will do it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Priscilla.
I make a motion that we adopt the Wyndham Rookie Supervisory Union bylaws. These are bylaws for, and I'll speak to it. These are bylaws for the SU meetings and for the SU to follow. The SU has limited capacity compared to a regular board in our districts because they serve a really good purpose in looking at some of the areas that we have delegated to them. But issues that each board doesn't agree with would have to come back to the board itself anyway, because we retain our local autonomy by doing that. If you saw the article in the paper, we have people concerned with the Rockingham having enough say in it, because we do pay more towards all of the schools. We pay more towards the high school. That's why we have 5 on this board versus the others that have lesser numbers. And Rockingham is a bigger district. For example, we have 450 students in Rockingham. You have here at the high school 320. A large portion of those are Rockingham, so your other districts are smaller. So that was the concern that you saw in the paper. I know it wasn't well explained in the paper why one of our board members was critical of it, but I thought it was worthwhile to explain to the high school why the Rockingham board member was critical of the exec board listing. And the exec board has limited power. It's appointed, it's the chairs of each of the boards or their designee. And they look at the superintendent's evaluation. That's their main goal right now. But the SU would also get together and see what other tasks they want the exec board to do. Everything has to come back to the board for approval. It's just like another committee. Any committee brings their work to the board. They don't just make the decisions out there by themselves. So that's just a aside, just so that you'll know.
Thank you.
And Chris, Kibby, Cheryl, and myself worked on the bylaws to update them. That was the committee.
Thank you for your work with that. So the motion is to pass adopt the Wyndham Northeast Supervisor Union bylaws. Is that correct?
Yeah, Supervisory union bylaws.
Any
yes.
further discussion on that? Deb does? Deb, go ahead.
Well, I did not get an email on those. Were we supposed to get an email of the ones they readopted or what? I didn't find, I don't have anything. I'm looking at my mail right now.
They were included in the agenda.
I thought I sent them out Friday as well, or Thursday or something like that. But I know Nicole. also-
Oh, okay. I see. You got it. Yeah. I'm good.
Okay.
I got it.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Deb, how do you vote, Deb?
Aye.
Thank you. Mary?
Aye.
David?
I haven't read them, therefore I'm going to abstain.
Good. Priscilla?
Aye.
I did.
Joe?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
And Rob?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Motion passes. Okay, next board meeting, February 26th, our annual meeting. Andy, do you know what time that starts? 7 p.m.?
That's
And we don't know where yet, correct?
at the high school, it's 1.
Well, it's at the high school, but
It won't be in the auditorium.
you'll let us know, right, Andy?
We are, I believe, we are looking to have that in the gymnasium at this time.
You guys gonna do a sound check, all that?
Yep.
Thank you. And Andy, you're gonna have bid specs to the board soon?
As soon as I get them, I will forward them onto the board.
Thank you. All right, up
Question.
next, we have,
Question.
Deb, go ahead.
Question. Wasn't the location of the meeting supposed to be posted on the warning?
It's at the high school.
It was
just as-
posted at the high school. We
Yeah, it
just
was
can't have
posted
in-
as the high.
Just
It was
not the
posted-
room. Okay.
Yeah, we tend not to post the room just because we've had issues of having to move things around. We will have signage to let people know where to go.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we have director's comments. Deb, what are your comments?
Today, while I was at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Zoom meeting, there was a bill in the House concerning mandatory hybrid meetings, which could pass, which would mean all meetings would have to require a Zoom component, no matter how difficult that has been. Even those who've been doing it consistently since COVID have done them. So that's a definite concern for some communities that don't want to do hybrid meetings, but we might be mandatorily required to do them if this passes. That's still in the House, though. The other thing is, and this is directed at Andy, just that I would really like to see the gully in front of the WNESU driveway repaired so I could not fall into it. That's all.
I can fill potholes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deb. Mary?
This board may or may not know I'm extremely hard of hearing, and I am struggling both to see the speakers as well to hear them. Hearing them is particularly difficult for me, and that includes our Zoom. And so I think we need to really seriously look into some sort of way to amplify speech.
Great suggestion, thank you. David?
I got two things. First is, I was hoping that we would have an opportunity to get just a little bit more out of the principal's report, because I believe, Kelly, that there is a deadline to notify families of the opportunity to take limited high school choice. It's a two-part question. What's the deadline, and how did we notify the families? And maybe you can't speak to that because we're on the director's comments, but I think it's this month. Would the chair be willing to allow the principal to respond to that?
Yes, if you'd like to.
Sure, I went out in our newsletter.
Okay. And the deadline.
I believe on the form, it's the 14th of February. I
Okay,
can check
plenty of
the
time
date.
left.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you, Kelly. The
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to bring up was right now, I choke on the word, the legislature. The legislature is working on its Budget Adjustment Act. And what the Budget Adjustment Act is, when they fix the little ups and downs in the current year's budget, which was passed during the previous session. I've been very, very interested in that, and I'm going to explain why. My interest is because I've seen an awful lot of money being steered in the direction of flood mitigation and remediation, and I think it's probably socially appropriate that they're still talking about the homeless situation, whether or not there's going to be additional monies allocated through the Budget Adjustment Act to pay for motels for people who are homeless. But I have a huge concern here, and that is this. We have received repeated assurances from the Department of Environmental Conservation that they are going to make us whole for the expenditures which we have made to mitigate PCBs. And that promise was made on the basis of a pot of money that, after Burlington got half of it, had about $14 million left in it. And it simply is not enough money to go around. And I have huge concerns that, once again, promises have been made, Montpelier, state capital, but I have great, great concerns about the follow-through. And I will say bluntly, I think we can just forget about it in the budget adjustment, and therefore I think it makes it incumbent on school boards across Vermont, most particularly those of us who have PCB problems, which are more than a few at this moment, and are likely to be more than a few in the very near future, if the legislature isn't successful in slowing down the process that they started without considering, shall we say, how they're going to pay for it. But I think that we're going to get stiff for a long time unless boards become more proactive about actually addressing the need for the Department of Environmental Conservation to make good on their promises and pony up the dough that the districts have spent on PCBs. That's my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Priscilla?
Okay. Yeah, we're working really hard on all of our areas, policy in particular, and yeah, you said February 15th, but students have up until April 15th to then give an answer as to whether they are attending the school or not attending. And then they can also, in my understanding, if they let the schools know before July 15th, they can return to their own school if they decide not to do that as well. So it's a kind of a complicated system, and one that we've kind of been handed. There were two bills in the legislature last spring, to do away and end school choice in Vermont. So I don't know where they're at this point, but it's a constant ongoing thing, and changing and looking at all of the choices for our students. It does add a little bit to our system that if a child finds some program in another school that is really, really something they want, they can apply and have that choice to go somewhere else, which does not happen in all the places across the country. It's just one of the things that gives Vermont its unique characteristics and allows us to be to feel really good about our educational system and all that we provide for them. Because every time we discuss, every time we have a board meeting, and every time we discuss things for students, I know this board is looking at what is best for our students, because I know every member at this table cares about those students, and on Zoom, excuse me, cares about the students in our school and puts them first in their thoughts, because the educational system has to be good, or we don't end up with citizens that we want to be able to converse with out there as adults and be able to have living in our community and be totally worthwhile community members. I just want to end it with saying I am just so thankful that we live in this community and we share all of this background, because Vermont is such a unique and wonderful place. Just look at all the turmoil in the rest of the world, and we know that this little piece here is something to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Jim?
Yes, I'd like to clear up some miscommunication from the last meeting. It was said that we gave our teachers Juneteenth as a holiday, and I wanted to clear that up, that the teachers do not get any holidays in their contract. That contract, the Juneteenth, was given in our support staff contract, and it was only given to year-round employees, which are basically the custodians, and 2 secretaries. The teachers are contracted for 185 days with, and then 175 days with students and 10 in service days. Their contract wage is divided into 26 equal installments, which allows them to receive a check all year long. The other misunderstanding, miscommunication that was voiced several times in the last meeting was, I am the representative for the negotiations team for the high school, for this board. You appointed me in March at the reorganizational meeting. Several meetings, I asked people, the board members, to look at the CBA for the teachers, to review it, to come to me with any questions, concerns, comments, so, anything. One person, thank you, Jamie, came through. It was said that this board has had no input. I reviewed the meetings. I asked several times for people to provide input. No one did. So I wanted to clear that up, because you can look it up in previous meetings, which I have reviewed several of them. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Mike?
I'm thrilled to hear Kelly is transitioning from a facilities manager to an academic focused principal. That's wonderful, and congratulations for that. And I think one of the things that we dealt with on the budget was very similar from the standpoint of a lot of our discussion has been consumed by the neglect that's happened over the years in this building, and there's costs that have impacted the budget as well as impacted our ability to educate our children. And you're a shining example of what happens when you don't cover all the bases. And that's why we thematically went for back to basics on the budget, both academically and in infrastructure. So I'm thrilled to hear that you made that transition, and knock on wood, you will continue to make that transition, because I think that's one of the major costs, not just the financial cost, but the cost of having neglected this building as long as it has. And I'm thrilled to hear that you're back in focusing on that. So that's great news. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Mike. Jamie?
I think this credit document is a testament to Kelly's creativity, and this is really inspiring to see. This inspires me, who is not in tune with all the things down at this sort of level, So I want to thank you for your creativity, and we shall acknowledge that. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, I would echo what Jamie said. It's good to have that. It gives us some touch points, and then to be able to ask questions, because that's the next step. And so I think that, I appreciate that transparency. Thank you.
I would just like to say that I'm proud of our school and I'm proud of our community. You know, I'd like to thank you, Nicole, for helping out tonight. In Andy's absence, I think it went better tonight. You know, Kelly, I think you know how I feel the work that you're doing here, and you know, I'm gonna always champion your effort. And you know, I appreciate the day in and day out, and I'm trying to you know, to also do that for you on my effort as a school board chair. So you know, I want to continue that, and we look forward to the annual meeting, and I hope a lot of people come and show up, because I think there's a lot of things that people may or may not know that we're actually doing here, and we have a clear, laser-focused direction on what the school is going to look like, what the education plan is going to look like for kids, and what we need to do as a community to improve the output of our youth, and that's how we save the world, right? So kids. So that's all I have. Thank you, everybody. So next up, we have negotiations. It's informational, gonna be executive session. I'm gonna need somebody to put that motion out there. David?
Okay, I would like to move that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussion of negotiations where premature public knowledge would likely place the boards and the Teachers Association at a disadvantage. That's my motion. Now I would like to speak to my motion. And what I want to say is that there was also some misinformation which occurred during the previous meeting, and that is the whether in fact the board is entitled to have updates on the negotiations. And I read now from the ground rules. This is item 7. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'll pass them around, because I've got plenty of copies.
Got 'em.
And what I'm referring to is number 7, says the parties agree not to make unilateral press releases regarding the substance of the negotiation unless or until impasse is declared by either or both parties. And this is the key language. The key language is, this ground rule shall not preclude either the boards, that's us, or the association from discussing the negotiations with its members. And the last time this came up, there was, shall we say, a strong, disinclination on the part of the 3 members of this board who participate in negotiations to discuss it with the board membership. And I think that this clears up that misunderstanding, and I'm hopeful that we can have that discussion tonight.
All right, so we have a motion to go into negotiations. David, you didn't say who you wanted to come in there. I would.
Oh, thank you. Yes, good point. I guess that my motion was incomplete, and I would like to invite the superintendent of schools, should he wish to participate.
Okay, and what about Cheryl Charles?
Oh, sorry, Cheryl. I see people behind me. Yes, let's have Cheryl in too, because I think Cheryl has some useful insights for us.
Okay. So questions on a motion, Jim?
I would like to speak to that motion before. I'd like to point out ground rule number 10, which says negotiations meetings shall take place in closed session and will assume positive intent that each party will remain civil at all times. In addition, because the sessions are closed, leaks of information outside the two parties will be considered bad faith.
I would like to respond to that, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Before he does, can I?
Do I have the floor?
Priscilla, go
sorry.
ahead. I'm gonna have Priscilla go first.
Okay. Number 7 does speak to, it says this ground rule does not preclude. However, number 10 does preclude anything but very general information. And it is very important that we get information from our board members and find out where they are on general topics. But it does keep us from giving specifics and itemized details to the board members because of number 10. And number 10 does say they are closed, and it cannot be outside of that. We also went back to the two teams in our last meeting after all of this came up at the last board meeting here, and clarified that between us so that we were very clear on what we could do and couldn't do. So I think all 3 of us that are sitting at this table are very willing to go in and do what we can as far as learning from you guys, all of you.
Thank you, Priscilla. David?
Okay, let's take a look at that language, which says, this is number 10, in addition, because the sessions are closed, leaks of information outside the two parties will be considered bad faith. When your school board enters into executive session, which is a privileged conversation, it is for the purpose of preventing leaks. And furthermore, I think that the negotiators have an obligation to their boards to inform those boards of what they're doing. And I actually think it's kind of a, how would I put this? It shows lack of trust on the part of the negotiators if they do not trust their boards to keep confidential information confidential. If we want to extend that logic through the rest of the board's work, it suggests that we should never have any executive sessions because none of us are capable of holding the confidence. And I reject that insinuation. I think this board, even under number 10 under ground rules, has every right and expectation to have a substantive discussion with their negotiators.
Yeah, thank you. Deb?
Yes, to speak to that, I believe that number 10 is counterindicative to number 7, which again reinforces what David had said. And I also want to remind the board of policy B3, considering conflict of interest for those members of our board. It's not just about a direct conflict, it's also about an appearance of conflict. And any board member who believes who sees that that's there should recuse themselves from this executive session. Thank you.
So, Rob, do you wish to recuse yourself from going into executive session?
I'll speak to it at that time.
If you're going to ask him, we have other people at this table that would have to excuse themselves as well. So, very specifically, at least, so at least 2 others I could name.
As a point of order, we were under discussion of a motion which does not involve conflict of interest at this point.
Thank you,
Okay.
David.
So, David, you have a motion on the floor to enter an executive session, and you're going to invite Cheryl and Andy and the board. Correct. Thank you. That was the hardest motion to go to executive session I think we've had yet. All right. Always a learning tool. Anything else? All right. So let's take a roll call. Deb?
I would just say that I think the last meeting was harder than this one. And I'll say aye.
Okay. Mary?
Aye.
David?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go in.
Let's do this. Good night.
So going to the
Your excuse.
What do you consider?
Thank you for you.
Oh,
Okay, I'm waiting. Well, that's an interesting statement for you to make.
Jason, did you make sure to announce that there will be no action taken?
I would like to see them.
There will be no action taken. I forgot it.
Andy, are you able to move them because?
Oh, can we suspend the people in the room outside the room that include me, or do I have to?
Yeah, no, I can do that. I'm sorry, I can do that. Hang on.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, thank you.
Look at how bright the sun is on Andy.
Oh, yeah. She has to decide on her computer.
We're just gonna, let us know when, Andy.
Should be all set.
All right, we're back from our executive session. It is 8:19 PM. I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned when no action was taken in our executive session. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Andy, what do I do at her computer?
You want to just unplug it and hand it to her.
Hey, Andy, have a safe trip back.
Thank you.
No, he's somewhere sunny.
California,
Oh.
for a superintendent's convention.
I was like, it's so dark here. Why is it so bright green? Envious.
I said too much, you should have kept still.
I'm sorry.
Priscilla, I'll see you on Thursday.
Thursday, yeah.